So let's pick up where we left off previously. If you haven't watched that video, I'll put that down into the description. So, motor's out of the car. We put the car into the vault and started the actual motor teardown. And as we started to dig into the motor, things became very clear and very depressing very quickly. We started first by pulling the front cover off of the motor and taking a look at the oiling pump. And immediately, looking at the oil pump, you can tell that the oil rotor itself has been chewed to pieces. It was actually cracked in two places. You can see that there are needle bearings that have been embedded into the oil rotor, which is pretty insane. I really have never seen anything like this. And what's interesting is I never saw the oil pressure dip. I never got any oil pressure alarms, nothing. And I cannot believe that, to the time that I turned the motor off, this is how the oil rotor was in the car and functioning. And we still had oil pressure, even though this thing was cracked in two pieces. I mean, it's pretty wild. So after inspecting, the front cover and the oil rotors, it was pretty clear that the lifter that had failed had kind of grenaded itself throughout the entire motor. And best that, I can assess, what probably happened here is one of the needle bearings in the lifter either deformed or seized up at full lift. The roller jammed, and the force was so great on the lifter body that it just kind of disintegrated in that location. And all of this debris got circulated throughout the entire system. We can see that there's damage to multiple rollers on the lifters. And there are also, we can look at this picture here. There are rollers that are completely fine, that did not see the debris circulation. It took out the camshaft. You can see that, a lot of the lobes on the camshaft in the areas where there was debris got chewed up. You have debris in the oil pickup. You can just see shavings and metal there. We then moved on to pulling the oil pan off. Took a look inside the pan. You can see needle bearings inside the pan. You can see bits of metal inside the pan from the disintegrated lifter. It was an absolute mess. From there, we took a look at the oil filter, cut the oil filter in half. I mean, we knew exactly what we were going to find in there. This was just more for our own entertainment, and it looked like prospector's gold. It definitely did not look good at all. Looking at the top end, the cylinder heads, you could definitely tell where you were down a cylinder and which cylinder it was, but there was no real damage to the cylinder heads whatsoever. The valves looked fine, the guides, the seals, all of that. I mean, we would be rebuilding all of this anyways, but no real damage to the top end. We took a look at the short block. And we definitely noticed that there was some scoring in the cam bore, and there was some damage in that lifter bore where the lifter disintegrated. So the block was damaged, and because on Viper blocks they do not have cam bearings, they have cam journals. When you damage one of the cam journals, you are essentially throwing the block away if you can't do a local hone or a polish and, get it within tolerance. So I immediately started thinking about, well, what are we going to do? Am I going to attempt to fix this block? How bad is it? We need to get it to a machine shop, get it cleaned up, have it inspected, and then all the journals and bores, get them mic'd or CMM'd and see where we stand on the numbers. But first and foremost, we needed to get the short block disassembled. We needed to get the rotating assembly out. And we needed to kind of ascertain how bad things looked on the bottom end, because this was really kind of the driving point for me on which direction I'm going to take with this. Am I going to rebuild the bottom end back to stock? Are the pistons, rods, crankshaft, are they okay? Are we just kind of doing a rebearing? Change the mains, change the rod bearings, and kind of slap everything back together, put the top end back on, obviously get a new camshaft. and repair the valve train damage and maybe clean the block up? Or am I going to go into a different direction? So we got the short block disassembled. We got the crankshaft out, pistons and rods came out, cam came out. And the first thing we looked at was the mains. Now, just a little background, I have around 17,000 miles on this setup since the previous build. I think I did heads cam around 3 years ago in 2017. So this motor has some miles on it, and those were not easy miles. You guys know I drive the fucking shit out of this car. And so this included, a lot of trips to the track, road racing, a lot of drag racing, autocross. We did some cross-country trips in this car, and many, many, many trips to Mexico, more than I can count. So suffice to say that the car has lived a great life. It's been taken care of very well, but at the same time, it's been used. I mean, I've literally driven this car clean across the country. It's been everywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast and everywhere in between. So much to my surprise, after all that abuse, the mains actually looked pretty much perfect. They looked really, really good. When we looked over at the rod bearings, there was some wear there. This may have something to do with the factory cross-drilled crank, which can starve the rod bearings of some oil, especially in a track environment. So maybe that's the reason that we see some of that, but it was nothing catastrophic. The factory pistons looked great. There was no physical damage to them. The connecting rods looked great, no physical damage there. However, on the piston skirts, you do get a lot of spackling on this machine printed graphite coating that you have. And I'm thinking that as soon as you had some of that metal get into the pan and into the windage area and starts getting whipped around, you started to get some collisions with the bottom of the pistons, and this is what you see on there. So at that point, I knew that I was in for a set of pistons for sure. Camshaft we inspected, and as we said before, it was torn up. And the crankshaft itself looked absolutely perfect. We did not see anything visually. We didn't mic it, but it did not look to be in bad shape whatsoever. So now that I had the whole picture, whole motors disassembled, we knew what had failed, what hadn't, what needed to be replaced, and what didn't. Now I could start thinking about making an informed decision on which direction to take. Now, I got a lot of comments on social media, panicked comments from Viper owners about the valve train, right? Like, oh my God, dude, holy shit, I'm worried about my car. Should I be checking mine? Should I be pulling the heads off? Should I inspect this? And I'll be honest here. I think that a lot of people blow my personal anecdote completely out of proportion here. So from everything that I've seen, this kind of a failure is very, very rare in our cars. Now, you can have lifters fail, but for them to fail in such a catastrophic manner and take your entire motor with it, that's a very rare occurrence. As we discussed in the previous video, I've had valve train issues in the past on Vipers, and it's always been a non-issue. It's kind of a go in there and replace the lifter kind of a thing. So this definitely sucked for me. I drew the short end of the stick on this one. I guess I was kind of overdue. I've never had any real issues with any of the Vipers that I've owned. But, if you're a Viper guy and you're sitting there kind of scratching your head or pulling your hair out over this, I really wouldn't worry yourself too much about it. I think it's an overall very rare occurrence and nothing that you need to really worry about. So I'll stop the video here. We've gone through the teardown. You've seen the carnage. And in the next video, we'll cover what I decided to do with the motor, why I decided to do it, and how much approximately it's going to cost me. So some very exciting things in the pipe for this car. I can't wait to talk to you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.